Hello again. It is surely the most tried and true technique among politicians to pretend that we are in terrible danger and that they alone can save us. The American writer H.L. Mencken said that the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary. Keir Starmer has evidently been reading Mencken lately because he's decided to try and put the wind up us by pretending that the Russians are liable to infect this country. They are not, of course, but coming so soon after the war in the Middle East, and with the Ukrainian war still raging, it's not a bad gambit. He might get some takers for it. Of course, the Prime Minister does not specify that it is the Russians who might attack us in our homeland. There's mention of all kinds of things, Iran, Korea, and so on. And he hedges his bets quite skillfully by mentioning hostile ideologies vaguely and leaving it to us to guess what they might be. In the introduction to a document published by NATO, he says that some adversaries are laying the foundations for future conflict, positioning themselves to move quickly to cause major disruption to our energy or supply chains to deter us from standing up to their aggression. For the first time in many years, we have to actively prepare for the possibility of the UK homeland coming under direct threat, potentially in a wartime scenario. The UK homeland under direct threat, eh? Scary stuff indeed. Perhaps we shouldn't ask too many awkward questions about this, or indeed other matters, and just allow the Prime Minister to get on with preparing the defence of the nation. After all, you wouldn't be bothering Churchill in 1940 about trivial things like expenditure on winter fuel payments for pensioners, would you? You would instead be rallying around a wartime leader and standing firm against German aggression. It is this scenario which Starmer is hoping to construct. If he can persuade us that we are all in deadly peril and that the country might even be invaded, then he feels that this might shut people up about all the other stuff they're always moaning about, like immigration and so on. Actually, it's not a bad strategy as far as it goes. It served Margaret Thatcher well enough in 1982 and rescued her from being the most unpopular Prime Minister ever to winning an enormous landslide in 1983. This is the game that Starmer is playing. At the press conference this afternoon, the Prime Minister was much keener on talking about what he calls threats to the homeland than he was in discussing the welfare reforms, which are causing a huge backbench rebellion. I'll pause here to ask viewers when they last heard mention of the British homeland. It's not an expression which I can remember being bandied about until quite recently. The homeland. It's something Starmer seems to have latched onto. He thinks it makes him sound like a patriot instead of the traitor which he actually is. When he was asked about welfare, he became positively incoherent. He was irritated. It was a NATO press conference held after the NATO meeting in The Hague, and he got quite irritable when people were asking him about welfare benefits and so on. A lot of what he said was just gibberish. For example, allow me to quote, just as it was a Labour government which created the welfare system in the future, so it falls to this government to make sure that we have a welfare system which is sustainable in the future to come. That is absolute word salad and makes no sense at all. Leaving aside the confusion of tenses there, some of us would say that it was the Liberals at the time that Lloyd George was Chancellor which created the welfare system in the years before the Great War. Old age pensions and unemployment benefits, they were all products of the Liberal government at that time. Some of us older people will still remember when folk talked about drawing the dole as being on the Lloyd George. Starmer's grasp of history is not all that strong. I'm thoroughly enjoying his appeal to patriotism at the moment. He's not a patriotic man. He's a terrible, snivelling traitor and coward. But it's amusing to watch him posing as a wartime leader. I think we're going to be a bit more seeing a bit more of this in the future.